Okay, so our last speaker has joined us already. I'm being given the thumbs up, and it's Hamish Jolly, as I introduced earlier. We cannot see him yet, but I'll start introducing. Hamish holds a Bachelor in Business Law and Accounting degree. He is a former Director of Strategy and Ventures at Bank West and former CEO of Greening Australia, one of Australia's largest environmental NGOs. He's a co-founder of Delorean Corporation and has played an integral role in advancing the bioenergy sector in Australia. Hamish would be speaking today on behalf of Joe Oliver, who is the Managing Director and also co-founder of Delorean. Joe is listed on the program as I mentioned earlier, but has unfortunately had to come down with some very familiar illness that we all have lurking around. So thank you very much for stepping in, and we are all ears. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone, and really appreciate the opportunity to present. I think, given the time, I'll just contextualise this in what's been discussed before. But I guess the key issue, the key explanation for us is Delorean Corporation, for context, is a fully integrated. We've been around about 8 years in Australia. We've been pioneering bioenergy and particularly anaerobic digestion in Australia, and working against those barriers to entry for anaerobic digestion, which have been referred to earlier. Having built a plant about 8 years ago, the second only commercial industrial scale plant in Australia, we've been able to put together an engineering division, an infrastructure division, building out a pipeline of projects, and even an energy retail company. So we've got momentum now with anaerobic digestion in Australia, but it's been a long journey. And we've got a pipeline of projects. We listed on the Australian Stock Exchange last year. So we've been able to sort of galvanise, I think, after a lot of hard work, the very embryonic start of anaerobic digestion in this country. In a very broad context, it's clear that anaerobic digestion provides the solutions for organic waste. A third of the world's food is waste. That's consistent with what's happening in Australia. We also have land and water wasted in production. And anaerobic digestion provides the solution by diversion of landfill here, and also the solution to some degree for biofertilising crops. What I would say in the Australian context is the economic model of energy crops here doesn't work. The subsidies in the downstream for anaerobic digestion don't exist. And so the industry relies on commercial industrial food waste streams for projects to get up, and on agricultural residue type models. The commercial food or the waste sector here in Australia is very much a spot market. It's hard to get bankable take or pay contracts in the Australian marketplace, so it's a difficult marketplace to penetrate. That said, there is a national policy in Australia to halve the amount of organic waste sent to landfill by 2030, which is interesting. Mark Sutton's comment about nitrogen earlier on. So that translates to about 12.5 million tonnes of organic waste, excluding the ag sector, around the country, and about 28 million tonnes if you include agriculture and fisheries. So there's no shortage of commercial, industrial, or organic waste flowing through the system here. It predominantly goes to landfill, though, or it goes through a compost market. So there is an opportunity here if we can get infrastructure into process and solve the logistics problems that have been mentioned earlier. Similarly to what we saw in the references to Africa and other nations, a lot of the ag waste does end up in landfill in Australia, but we also have open agricultural burning. And whilst energy crops in their own right aren't necessarily economic as a feedstock, certainly residual agricultural wastes are a viable feedstock provided we can get them off and into a digester economically. So certainly providing that solution for the ag sector and not displacing food is a clear solution here in the Australian marketplace. Landfill disposal, we've got a lot of land here, so there's still a lot of land in Australia, a landfill happening in Australia, even though there's initiatives in each state and federally to divert. Soil injection, it does occur, but doesn't produce the renewable energy outcome. Composting similarly does the fertiliser job, but anaerobic digestion delivers with the extraction of energy, delivers the renewable energy and the fertilizer. So, we're still educating a marketplace to a degree here, but I think people are starting to get that message. Similarly, there's some good soils here in Australia, but there's also, for example, in West Australia, where I'm speaking to you from, very sandy soils are a big requirement for fertilizer and broadacre agricultural farming. This graph, sets out the vicissitudes in the fertilizer price, exacerbated by what's going on in Russia and in Ukraine, and the opportunity to displace 1 tonne of mineral fertilizer with Digestate, which has got attendant savings in it. So a couple of quick case studies. This is the first plant we built about 8 years ago, 50,000 tonnes per annum, co-located with a composter, in this case, diverting commercial and industrial organics and providing power behind the meter for the composter and exporting to grid. And interestingly, I guess, the second project that we can point to more recently, which we're just commissioning, is co-located with a milling operation in South Australia. We think it's the first of its kind in the world, processing the ground out milled feed, which is the husk and dust that's coming from the mill operation, putting it through anaerobic digestion, repatriating electricity and heat to allow that mill operation to grow. It's on fringe of grid, and diverting the balance through to a composting operation. I guess importantly, the story even up to a couple of years ago here was all about electricity and heat. Electricity, particularly behind the meter, because that was where it was most economic. But with the rise in gas prices globally, and more recently the risk of pipelines having stranded operations and gas being diverted from new developments in Australia, there's the big story now is biomethane and its opportunity to displace coal and support the transition of gas in the Australian marketplace. So look, there's probably a bit more, but I think that they're probably the key points, and given time, we'll leave room for Q&A later on. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. That was very useful, and I think all the presentations link together quite nicely to actually provide that vision that we spoke about of AD, non-living energy, also having to do with nitrogen. It's not only a technology that applies to Europe, it's a technology that can help worldwide, and is happening in agricultural, in food waste, etc.